Minecraft might just be one of the most well-known and successful games of all time. Even if you ignore the sheer tremendous number of copies sold, the game has seeped so deeply into pop culture that even people who do not usually play video games may play Minecraft regularly. The game has such an active community, with them making some truly incredible creations, ranging from mods adding extensive new content, to enormous builds and technically genius redstone creations. Minecraft has gone through so many updates since its first playable versions in 2009, that it can be easy to forget that Minecraft started off as a very basic game, lacking much content at all, with there not even being mobs. So I wish to look back at the extensive history of Minecraft, so I can see and truly appreciate just how far the game has come from its most humble of beginnings. The story for Minecraft starts off with Marcus Persson, more commonly known as Notch. Notch's first game was actually a text adventure he made as a kid. In later life he would go on to work on a series of different games, though none of them would be anywhere near as successful as his future hit game. When Notch began work on Minecraft, he found himself influenced by games such as Dungeon Keeper and an unreleased game he had personally worked on called Ruby Dung, which itself was heavily influenced by Dwarf Fortress. Even during the earliest development of Minecraft, then referred to as Cave Game, YouTube would be tied to it, with Notch posting updates on his YouTube channel. It is really worth mentioning the impact that YouTube as a platform has had on Minecraft and building its community. Arguably more so than any other game, YouTube and YouTubers have helped to grow exposure for the game, and keep fans playing to the point that many of the largest YouTubers are or have been Minecraft YouTubers. For the sake of this video, I will split the overall history of Minecraft's development into 3 eras. The pre-release era lasting from May 2009 to September 2011, covering pre-release through to the last beta version of the game. The pre-Microsoft era from November 2011 to September 2014, covering updates 1.0 and up to and including update 1.8. Finally, the post-Microsoft era from September 2014 to today, covering all future updates from then on to this point. The earliest known playable versions of Minecraft are referred to as pre-classic. These early versions of the game were only playable by Notch, meaning that aspects of them are shrouded in mystery. However, through the versions that are playable, and from old videos from Notch's YouTube channel, we can get a decent idea of what Minecraft was like back then. On the Minecraft launcher, the latest version of pre-classic that can be played is RD161348. This version gives an insight into the initial direction of the game, but as one would imagine, it was incredibly basic when compared to what it would inevitably become. Even gaining an item when destroying a block was not yet implemented into the game. There were no menus or settings to change, and left-clicking would place blocks or right-clicking would destroy them. The only other entities running around are humans, who could actually be spawned by pressing G, while pressing R would teleport the player somewhere else. While these versions may seem bare bones in content, what really is important is that they showed key features like world generation working. The early classic era began in May 2009 with the release of 0.0.11a. Several iconic Minecraft blocks were first added during this time, such as bedrock. Water and lava were both introduced around this time as well, though they lacked much in the way of physics. The size of the map was increased, with caves filled with coal, iron and gold ore being added, along with an infinite ocean to trap players. Ore spawns were yet to be fully balanced, so iron would spawn in incredibly large veins. There was some experimentation about how the building mechanics would work, since it was changed so that right-clicking would swap between either placing or destroying blocks. As Minecraft began to get into its stride, Notch turned his attention towards getting multiplayer working. In-game multiplayer functioned in a somewhat similar way as it does today, with custom skins and chat being implemented. Some new blocks and sounds for when blocks are destroyed were added to the game, as well as the very first few commands. While commands would be removed during the in-dev era, many of the commands added during the multiplayer test would be reintroduced at a later date. With the basics of multiplayer being worked out, development could finally start on one of the feature game modes of Minecraft, Survival. When the mode was first released, it was only available to Minecraft Premium members, which was essentially paid early access before the game was released. Originally, Survival didn't actually have a hunger bar. Instead, when eating brown mushrooms, health would be recovered. The first 5 mobs added to the game were zombies, skeletons, pigs, and spiders. The accidental creation of the creeper when Notch was messing around with the pig dimensions is well known by the Minecraft community, but something not so well known is that the creeper actually had a jump attack at first, with their famous explosion only happening when they were killed. Skeletons still shot arrows, despite the fact that those were not yet in the game, but they shot arrows extremely quickly, which proved to be incredibly deadly. The spider was just a terrifying monster, with it being faster than even the player, making them an extremely difficult enemy, especially since there was no respawning system, and dying would just delete the world. There was a point system, which was an early version of the experience system we have today, where points were awarded for killing mobs, although these points were pretty much useless originally. When TNT was added to the game, players would start with 10 upon creating a world. As you could imagine, that probably wasn't the best idea. Interestingly though, TNT could not actually damage stone. The final stage of classic Minecraft would have the mining and building controls become what they are today, with left-clicking mining and right-clicking placing blocks. Creative mode, which had been replaced with survival mode, was reintroduced alongside some changes, such as being able to push other players and the introduction of obsidian. Classic Edition was exactly what it needed to be. Instead of just becoming lost in adding new content, Notch managed to balance new releases with important balance and optimization fixes. The next big series of updates after Classic Edition was InDev, which lasted from the 23rd of December 2009 through to the 5th of February 2010. The first versions of InDev are referred to as InDev 0.31. Notch seemed to experiment a lot more during this time, with many of the features being added being heavily tweaked or even removed before the full release of the game. One such feature like this is gears. They were not technically obtainable in the game, but if spawned in they would spin when placed. It's never been officially stated what the purpose of the gear was. However, evidence seems to suggest that gears were meant to act in a similar way to redstone before redstone would later replace it. All of the new mobs which were added during InDev 0.31 will be removed at a later date, with the most well-known example being the Giant. The other mobs added were Steve, Black Steve, Beast Boy and Rana. Just looking at these guys, it's pretty obvious why they were removed and never added upon, since they don't really fit in with the Minecraft aesthetic. Reworked from Survival Test, Survival Mode would officially be released to all players alongside the crafting system, although there wasn't too much that could actually be crafted. Smelting was also in the game, but since furnaces were not added yet, you simply threw the items into lava to smelt ore. A bunch of other admin features were added, such as difficulty settings, clicking F11 to go to full screen, and dropping entire stacks. Diamonds were first added during this time, along with shovels, axes, pickaxes, swords and mushroom stew. Some new options came for world generation, with optimizations for level type, shape, size, and theme. The level options determined what the world would be like, with the options being island, floating, flat, or normal. The level shapes available were square, long, or deep, while the world sizes were small, normal, or huge. There were two level themes, the first being normal Minecraft world, with the second being the hell option, which had lava instead of water, and some other changes. The second half of the InDev era is just referred to as InDev, with the updates for it coming out in February 2010. The main focus of this era was the implementation of the farming system, though the only thing that could be grown was wheat. Third person was introduced as something which would remain largely the same after being added. Finally, armour was changed so that the player could equip and be protected by it. For the mobs already in the game, their drops were edited to be more in line with what they are today. Something regarding world generation that will be removed before alpha was the InDev house. A small square house players could spawn in when creating a new world. The final versions of Minecraft to come out before the alpha of the game was officially released as the InfDev updates, not to be confused with InDev. A bunch of key blocks and features came during this time, to the point that it isn't always immediately obvious how old this version is, with the final update of InfDev coming at the end of June 2010. The very first version of the rail system was added, with minecarts and mine tracks, as well as saddles and ladders, which finally added ways to speed up travel around the Minecraft world, which is especially handy considering that it was in InfDev when worlds would now become infinite. Cobblestone and obsidian could now both be created when lava and water are mixed together, through the use of the new buckets. It was also during this time that doors, a staple of any bad looking first house, were added. Dungeons were one of the best additions during this time, since it added a sort of depth to exploring and came out during a time when cave generation was being improved, giving further reasons more than just gathering resources to venture underground, something which was sorely needed. The engine also got some graphical changes, with the option to choose between fast or fancy graphics for those running games on a potato. The alpha period of Minecraft was when the game stopped just being a hobby for Notch, and he began working on it full time. As a result, the inflow of content dramatically increased. This especially shows in the second alpha update, version 1.01, which added the redstone system. When it was first added, redstone did not actually have a name, and its only real purpose was to open doors, such as the new iron door. To activate redstone, the new redstone torch, lever, stone button or pressure plates in stone and wooden variants could be used. The timeline for alpha can be split up into 3 different parts, 1.0, 1.1 and 1.2, each adding a variety of different features. 4 new mobs will be added during alpha 1.0. The 2 passive mobs added were the cow, which could be milked, and the chicken, which would drop eggs every now and again. Although there was no purpose to these eggs originally, the 2 new hostile mobs added were the slime and the spider jockey, both of which were unique additions to the game. To help fight these new mobs, the previously introduced cloth armour was reworked to be leather armour. The first version of a new biome to be added to Minecraft was the winter mode map type, where when a new world was made, there was a 25% chance of it being a winter world, with ice and snow. Since there was a noticeable decrease in passive mobs and lack of grass, these winter worlds were significantly tougher to survive in than standard ones. Winter worlds would not last long since they were removed in the same year when biomes were added. Navigation wise, there were some additions to the minecart system, with both furnace and chest minecarts being added. The furnace minecart especially was extremely practical, since it meant minecarts could now be pushed around, while the player did nothing. Boats were also added, making water traversal much easier than before. Not much was added during Alpha 1.1, with the most notable new additions being the compass and the fishing rod, though the fishing rod would not have a use until Alpha 1.2. The rest of the update consisted of changes such as lava being usable in furnaces and new textures for paintings. The final versions of Alpha ran from October 30th through till December 3rd, and is often referred to as the Halloween update. By far the most significant new addition was the Nether dimension and everything surrounding it. The Nether has become an iconic aspect of Minecraft, with its difficulty to survive in being well known. Originally though, there was only 2 mobs that would spawn in the Nether, with them being the zombie pigman and the ghast, both of these having new mob mechanics. The zombie pigman were the first neutral mob in the game, and the ghast was the first flying one. Skeletons, while not spawning in the Nether, were also given their iconic bows, instead of just shooting arrows out their faces. 3 different blocks would spawn in the Nether: Netherrack, Soul Sand, and Glowstone. While each of these blocks have their purpose, the most sought after of these blocks was Glowstone, since it added an actual alternative to torches for light sources. The new blocks were the main reason to explore the Nether on its introduction, since things such as Nether fortresses and quartz ore would not be added until much later. The other blocks added during the Halloween update were the pumpkins and the jack-o'-lanterns. Biomes will be fully implemented into the game, with the Winter World mode being reworked into the Tundra biome, with a new desert biome also being added alongside it. The final new mechanic added during this time was fishing. The beta for Minecraft will be split up into 9 different versions, releasing from December 2010 to September of the next year. When looking at the beta, it is easier to look at beta 1.0 through to 1.7 as one part, and 1.8 as another, since it is the first stage of the 2-part adventure update. Since these were the last versions of the game to come out before the official release, the game was heavily polished during this time. Survival in particular had a lot of new content added, with both the achievement and the statistics system being implemented into the game. Beds were added during beta 1.3, finally allowing players to not only skip to day, but also set respawn points, while maps made it easy to keep track of the world, both things that were badly needed. A functioning weather system was added, where depending on the biome the player was in, there was a chance it would either rain or snow. There was also a chance a thunderstorm would happen, where periodically lightning would strike down from the sky and hit the ground. If this lightning hit a creeper, it would turn into a charged one, which can create a much stronger explosion, whereas if a pig was hit it would turn into a zombie pigman. Adding some much needed variety to the world, 2 different types of trees were added, with them having unique saplings, leaves and logs, although the logs created the same basic wooden planks. From Beta 1.0 to 1.7, 2 new types of mobs were added, while sheep got some new changes. Now sheep could be dyed different colours, and black, grey and light grey sheep could spawn naturally in the overworld. Previously, sheep would only drop wool when hit by the player, but this was changed in Beta 1.7, making it so that the only way to get wool from a sheep without killing it was with the new shears. The first of the 2 mobs introduced was the squid, which for years was the only underwater mob in the game. Functionality wise, the squid served little purpose, though interestingly, when it first came out it could be milked. The second of the new mobs were the wolves, which were also unique at the time, of them being the first tameable mob in the game. The redstone system would be greatly expanded upon during beta. Redstone repeaters were added, allowing for not only the extension of a redstone signal, but also delaying a signal. Several new blocks gave new functionality to redstone beyond just opening doors. Pistons and sticky pistons allowed for the creation of secret passages, as well as some rather creative redstone machines. Dispensers had a variety of uses, such as in traps, and the different sound options for note blocks have been used creatively by the community over the years. Some new foods came out, such as cake and cookies. Bone can now be turned into bone meal to help greatly speed up the entire farming process. The impact that the new redstone items had on farming in the game should not be overlooked. Dispensers and the different types of pistons gave access to new ways to form giant crop farms, where the drops could be harvested, which encouraged the already sizable player base to experiment with trying to create the most efficient farms possible. Early on in beta, capes, originally known as cloaks, were added into the game, with the Mojang cape. I've always found capes somewhat interesting, since there are a fair few people who don't seem to know these are in the game, or perhaps don't know how to get them. As mentioned earlier, update 1.8 was the first part of the adventure update, which, as the name suggests, aimed to focus on adventuring as well as combat. One of the changes to combat which is not around in modern Minecraft is the ability to block using the sword. It was a useful feature for fighting, but years later would be removed when shields were added. Now holding down the shoot button would pull the arrow back, making it go further and do more damage to enemies. When an enemy was killed, it would drop experience that could be collected by the player. But because enchanting tables were not yet in the game, there was really little purpose to collecting it outside of getting an idea of how many kills you have had. On the reverse side, the health system for players was changed. Before this, healing lost health was done by simply eating food, with there not being a separate bar for. This would change in beta 1.8, when health would only be slowly regained when the new food meter was over 80% full. Alongside these changes, 5 new food options, melons, raw and cooked chicken, raw beef and steak were made available for players to create and use. Creative mode would be reintroduced as an optional game mode. Ravines and 3 new types of structures, villages, mineshafts and strongholds were put into the world generation, all of which quickly became iconic parts of the game. Villages would only spawn in the plain and desert biomes, with them essentially being lifeless until villagers were added in the second part of the adventure update. The same can be true with strongholds and the end, since while strongholds were added in this update, it was in preparation for the next update when the Ender Portal and the End would be properly introduced. The 3 new mobs for 1.8 were the infested block spawning silverfish, the small poisonous cave spiders, and the teleporting block stealing enderman. The Minecraft engine got a bunch of tweaks, with improved world generation, lighting rendering effects and bug fixes. The entire pre-release era of Minecraft had the game going from a pretty basic, more proof of concept game than anything, to becoming far more like the Minecraft we know today. There have been many games with playable alphas and betas over the years. They've released in a state that can be best described as disappointingly shallow of content, then is just abandoned. Minecraft, on the other hand, ended its beta and went on to release as a clearly full game, with new content even coming out at release and onwards even till today. The new content in the full release of Minecraft was the second part of the adventure update. Originally, this content was supposed to be in beta 1.9, but after the pre-releases came out, it was decided it would instead become Minecraft 1.0. The stronghold added in beta 1.8 would now generate a new room containing a silverfish spawner and an end portal. The portal activated the same way as today, by using Eyes of Ender that could also be used to locate the stronghold. The end gave, well, an end to Minecraft. It gave a primary objective for players to work towards, but of course there was never any pressure to get there. Travelling through the Ender portal, players would be met with an island floating in a dark abyss, with large obsidian towers protruding out of it, and Endermen everywhere, while in the skies above the Ender Dragon patrolled, being healed by crystals. The dragon fight itself was slightly different to how it is today, with it in some ways being harder and in some ways being easier. For one, the dragon did not actually have a ranged attack, but it also would not fly into the centre of the map every now and again, making hitting it far harder. Once the Ender Dragon was slain, it would spawn an Ender portal with a dragon egg on top of it. Going back through the portal would give a weird end credit sequence before spitting players back out into the overworld. What makes having an ending like this in a game like Minecraft work is that the game never pushes you to go to a stronghold. Going to one and working out what to do is optional. Plus, when you do beat the dragon, you get a cool trophy in the form of the egg, and can go back to doing whatever you want. A new difficulty that came with this content would give players seeking an extra challenge just what they wanted, with hardcore difficulty, where after dying, the world would become unplayable. The Nether got some new content as well. Now sprawling Nether fortresses could appear in the hell-like world. Blazes could come out of spawners in the fortress to defend it by flying around and shooting fireballs. Defeating these blazes was necessary to make Eyes of Ender and go to the end. But the Nether fortresses weren't the only new threat in the Nether, with magma cubes patrolling near the lava, with them essentially being fire-immune Nether slimes. Baby variants of cows, chickens, pigs and sheep were spawnable through the new breeding system. These baby mobs would grow into the adult variants over time. The other new mob added were the mushrooms, one of the often more forgotten about passive mobs in Minecraft worlds. This rare mob can be somewhat practical since right-clicking on it with bowls fills them with mushroom stew, giving access to a rather good source of food. The mushroom can always be sheared for mushrooms, but doing this turns it back into a normal cow. Another first type of mob that came out was the snow golems, with them being the first craftable mob in Minecraft. These served as good guards for bases, since they would attack enemy mobs, but the main drawback of them in future updates will be that they would melt away in certain biomes. The final new mob added were villagers, which would populate the villages. Their main purpose at the time was just to walk around, since they couldn't be traded with yet. With all of these new mobs and threats in the world, it is appropriate that with 1.0 potions were added to the game. Brewing potions in Minecraft is an interesting history itself, with it undergoing changes in a short period of time. Originally, potions were meant to be created using cauldrons by throwing ingredients and potions into them. A tweet from Jens Bergensen, yes, I'm aware I butchered that name, suggests that in pre-release there were 161 unique brewable potions, and would likely be 2,653 when all ingredients were added. At some point during the creation of the brewing system, it was decided that instead of cauldrons, a new block, the brewing stand, would be created for that purpose. The enchanting system that came out at the same time is another mechanic which key block was changed before release, though in this case not to the same extreme of making a new block. Pictures posted by Notch reveals that the original enchanting table was going to be made from cobblestone instead of obsidian, but at some point during the creation of the table this was changed. Something interesting about the enchanting table is that the symbols coming off nearby bookshelves and in the enchanting menu are actually just random words thrown together in the standard galactic alphabet from the Commander Keen series. If you include the End Island, a total of 7 new biomes were added in 1.0.0. 4 of these were based around the snow, with new frozen rivers and oceans. The 2 other non-end or ice-based biomes were the Mushroom Island and the Mushroom Island Shore, with them being extremely rare biomes where the mushrooms could spawn. There were also a bunch of smaller new additions, such as 9 new music discs, and reworks such as block textures. The following new content in Update 1.1 was not as big as its predecessor, with it mainly adding some new items and changing how some blocks and mobs worked. The key new things added were some bow enchantments, spawn eggs for all mobs but the giant, ender dragon and snow golem, the new beach biome and the super flat world type where slime spawned more frequently. Blacksmiths could now spawn in villages, and there was also a series of improvements to the mob AI. Update 1.2 on the other hand added a fair amount of new content, with a lot of it being focused on the new jungle biome. Because of how dense with trees the sprawling jungle biomes can be, they can easily seem far bigger than they actually are. Populating these new jungles were the ocelot mob, which unless a player has fish will usually avoid players. Ocelots could be tamed, turning them into cats using fish, in a similar way to how wolves could be tamed into dogs. The Iron Golem would become the second craftable mob in the game, and is often seen as far stronger and more useful than its snow counterpart, with it having more health and being usable in every biome. Although the Iron Golem is much more expensive thanks to the 4 iron blocks needed to craft it. Unlike the Snow Golem, the Iron Golem can also spawn naturally in villages, to guard them. Other additions of note with 1.2 are Desert Wells, the Bottles of Enchanting only obtainable via creative mode for quick levelling, fire charges that are shootable from dispensers, and redstone lamps adding an alternative to torches and glowstone. 1.2 also made it so that different types of wood would now give different coloured planks, with the previously standard planks becoming the oak planks. The impact that different colours of wood had on designs in the game was massive, giving players access to new options for decoration. Before the next update would come out, there would be a separate and somewhat different version of Minecraft released, Xbox 360 edition, with it releasing May 9th, 2012. When it first came out, this version of Minecraft could only be purchased digitally through Xbox Live Arcade. It would take until June of the next year for the physical disc to be sold. The initial sales for this console edition were incredibly strong, with it being the best-selling game on Xbox Live Arcade within 24 hours. The PlayStation 3 edition would not come out until December 2013. These console editions for the game, while getting new updates, tended to get them at a slower speed than Java Edition. Mostly though, these versions were similar, except for some changes made to the UI and crafting system, as well as world sizes. The impact console editions had on the growth of Minecraft should not be ignored. Part of the reason why console edition was so popular was just how easy it was to play with friends on it, especially for younger fans. The PlayStation 4 and Xbox One editions came out early September 2015. There would also be editions of Minecraft released for other hardware, such as the PS Vita and the Wii U, although these are not often remembered as much as the others. One of the things that would set console edition apart from the normal editions were the paid texture pack, some of which came with their own themed maps. Another edition of Minecraft that was popular was Pocket Edition, the early alpha for which released on the Android market in August 2011, with it being released for more devices over time. As mobile ports go, Pocket Edition was actually a really good one, with the game handling surprisingly well on mobile devices, and the edition was very popular. The legacy of Pocket Edition actually extends far beyond mobile devices, but that's something that will be talked about later. Of course, there are other editions of Minecraft, such as Education Edition, and even spin-offs like Story Mode and Dungeons, but I will not be talking about those here. Update 1.3 would have a lot of quality of life changes, such as changing how much damage creepers and TNT did depending on difficulty, and changing how many signs can be carried in a stack. But that doesn't mean there weren't lots of important new additions as well. In fact, it was in Update 1.3 that the villager trading system became part of the game, a mechanic which has been used and exploited by players since it was added. The primary currency for trading with villagers were the new emeralds, which could be found underground or obtained from trading. Come to think of it, trading has led to players making some creative ways of keeping villagers safe in small areas. One of the most important blocks in Minecraft, the Ender Chest, will be added as part of Update 1.3. Ender Chests with their basically cloud storage system serve as the only real secure way to store items in the game. Now players would not have to worry about anyone stealing their stuff or hiding valuables, though Ender Chests are very limited in how much they can store. Another practical addition was the Book and Quill, which has a lot of different applications, especially in adventure maps and the like. Other new block additions included tripwire hock, cocoa beans, sandstone stairs, and stairs and slabs having variants for other plank types. Several of these new blocks could be found in two of the new structures, the Desert Temple and the Jungle Temple. Out of the two, the Desert Temple seems the more common, with its TNT trap being easily set off by players who are not careful enough. The Jungle Temple, on the other hand, tends to be harder to find and has less loot chests in it, but has a redstone puzzle within, which, since this is Minecraft, can just be mined through. The other new structure in 1.3 are the Desert Wells. There was also the new large biomes world type. Update 1.4, also referred to as the Pretty Scary update, is arguably one of the best updates to come out during this period of Minecraft's history, with it having a huge amount of sheer new content. One of the new mobs added were the deadly wither skeletons. These would spawn in nether fortresses, making these already dangerous parts of the nether even more deadly. Players unlucky enough to be hit by these monsters would have the wither effect put upon them for several seconds, making combat much harder at close range. Upon death, there is a small chance that a wither skeleton will drop their skulls. These skulls are then used to create the Wither, the second boss added to the game. There was, and still is, a lot of debate around which of the two bosses are actually harder, but both bosses can be extremely tough if you aren't prepared. Witches were the only other mob from update 1.4 that also had a ranged attack, with them throwing potions at players to harm them, and make them easier to kill. These mobs are relatively rare, with them spawning in swamps and in their witch huts. The two other new hostile mobs would both be new zombie variants. One of these, the zombie villager, had some pretty interesting spawning mechanics. The chance of one of these spawning naturally is actually rather low at 5%, but they can be created when a villager is killed by a zombie, with the chance of them becoming a zombie villager increasing with difficulty. The second of zombie variants added is, in my opinion, one of the deadliest and most annoying enemies in the entire game, that being the baby zombie. These ones are just so much faster and harder to hit than normal zombies that I have died so many times, although that may just be me. The final mob added is the bat, and it is one that I also find pretty annoying, but for a completely different reason. It can be frustrating when you are building underground, and your build slowly fills up with multiple bats that just keep making noise. When talking about update 1.4, it can be easy to just look at all the cool new mobs that were added, but it is important not to forget that it also had some of the most useful blocks in the game, including the command block. Command blocks completely changed the map creation scene for Minecraft, since now creators could make massive, elaborate command combinations that could be activated simply with a redstone pulse. But these command blocks weren't the only extremely useful new block, since there was also beacons and anvils, all being extremely expensive with it requiring a nether star, as well as a large sum of raw materials to activate. Having a beacon in a base can exponentially speed up the progress of a build, or make players even tougher to kill. Perfect for dealing with withers or groups of enemies. Anvils were another great addition to the game, with it making repairing easier and finally allowing players to name items. As an added bonus, they could also be used in traps since they damage enemies they landed on. One of the other uses for the anvil was to use the new enchanted box to add enchantments directly to items, rather than just using the enchantment table. The main advantage of doing it like this is that you know exactly what enchantment you're going to get, and you can store these enchanted books for later use. 5 new types of food were added, with them being normal and poisonous potatoes, carrots, golden carrots and pumpkin pie. Both potatoes and normal carrots often are planted in village farms, so are easily accessible, while pumpkin pie and golden carrots were craftable, with neither of them being too expensive. The functionality of carrots would go beyond just being a food source, since they can be combined with a fishing rod to create a carrot on a stick, allowing pigs to be steered when riding them. Other items from this update worth mentioning are fireworks, night vision potions, and invisibility potions, as well as chests becoming Christmas themed from December 24th to 26th. If update 1.4 was one of the best updates to the game for people who love combat, then 1.5 is the best update for people who love redstone. I would go as far as saying this update completely revolutionised redstone and what could be achieved with it. If I had to pick which 2 blocks from this update were the most important, I would definitely pick the redstone comparator and the hopper. Comparators are able to compare or subtract redstone signals, and emit its own signal based on which is stronger, as well as detecting if there is an item in a block inventory, such as a chest. Hoppers on the other hand are able to transfer items from block inventories. A great example of what could be achieved with these two blocks is auto-storage systems, but that's on the easier end with players making some truly incredible redstone creations using them. Both hoppers and comparators require the new never spawning quartz. They could also be used to make quartz blocks. Of course, comparators and hoppers weren't the only new redstone blocks, with trapped chests, droppers, redstone blocks, daylight sensors, activator rails, as well as iron and gold pressure plates also having many applications. 2 new minecarts were added, with them being minecarts of hoppers and minecarts of TNT. As you can imagine, both of these have practical uses, although for 2 very different types of players. The next update, 1.6, would be called the Horse Update, and of course this finally added horses to the game. Prior to this, travelling long distance in Minecraft was very time consuming, with your main option being pigs with a saddle, minecarts, nether portals and boats. Pigs were not exactly that fast, so were rarely used. Minecarts could be left AFK to travel, but that required building a rail system, limiting where you can go. Nether portals could travel great distances, but also suffered from the problem of going places you've already been. And boats were limited to water, and before being updated were pretty bad to handle, with them breaking easily. Horses were the solution to this problem, with them being able to travel at a quick speed across most terrain with ease. Honestly, the biggest problem for horses is travelling across water. The horse's slower counterpart, the donkey, also has its uses, with it having the ability to carry chests. There were also 2 other types of horses added. The mule, which was created by breeding a horse and a donkey, as well as a skeleton and zombie horses, although these 2 did not spawn in the game yet. Since horses cannot be controlled without a saddle, it was really convenient that this update was when leads were also added to the game, allowing for mobs to be guided and hitched to fences. Horses could also be protected using the new armour, while name tags allowed for all mobs to be given names. 2 of the new blocks made compact storage even easier, with both the block of coal and hay bale, meaning coal and wheat did not have to take up so much room in chests. The other blocks added were all decorational, with hardened clay, which could be turned into stained clay as well as carpets. Carpets and stained clay especially are blocks which can make builds look so much nicer when used correctly. Update 1.7 would be called the update that changed the world. This will be a fitting name for the update, with it completely changing the Minecraft world generation, with many new biomes being added. Some of these biomes were just variations of biomes we had already had, such as sunflower plains and birch forests, while others were completely new, such as the Mesa and Ice Spike biomes. Appropriately for this update, there was a new world generation type, Amplified, which creates some incredibly unique looking worlds that the normal world generation engine just does not create. A bunch of new plants and biome themed blocks, such as red sand and podzol, were added. This included 2 new types of wood, acacia and dark wood. One of the most useful blocks to come with this update was packed ice. What separates this ice from the usual ice is that it does not melt or turn into water when broken, making it perfect for creating boat highways through the nether to connect portals. Stained glass and stained glass panes were also added in this update, with them making great decoration blocks. The only new mob added in 1.7 was the chicken jockey, which is a baby zombie of any variant on a chicken. The origin of this mob actually comes from an image posted on Imgur and Reddit that Dinnerbone saw of a baby zombie stuck inside of a chicken. While there were not actually any fish mobs apart from the squid in the game yet, pufferfish, clownfish and salmon food items could be obtained from fishing, although these fish actually having mobs was still several years away. Something which had been overlooked for many years at this point was the Minecraft Ocean. There wasn't really anything in there except for squids, and update 1.8 aimed to slightly change that through the addition of ocean monuments. Out of all the temple type buildings added, these ocean monuments were by far the largest and deadliest. Manoeuvring underwater actually used to be somewhat slow and tedious in Minecraft, since being able to swim properly wasn't added until update 1.13. This made temples tough enough, but what made them really deadly were the new guardian mobs that patrol around and inside the monuments. Getting through to the inner sanctum of an ocean monument is not a simple task if you are not prepared, especially since in the centre of the monument there is an Elder Guardian, which strength-wise is basically a mini-boss. The two other mobs added in this update were the Endermite, with it being a small purple mob that has a chance to spawn when a player uses an Ender Pearl or when an Enderman teleports, and the other being the Rabbit. Something that I didn't know about rabbits is that there is a spawnable killer rabbit version in Java Edition. Different versions of doors, fences and fence gates were added for all the different types of wood currently in the game. There were also some new types of rocks added, with them being diorite, andesite and granite. 4 blocks from 1.8 that are particularly noteworthy are slime blocks, banners, armour stands and barrier blocks. Slime blocks have pretty limited decoration value, but still have many uses, especially in redstone creations since they can drag blocks connected to them when pushed by pistons. They also make good trampolines. Banners on the other hand had little practical value, but look cool, with it being possible to put patterns on them. Armour stands were one of the most practical blocks, with them being a great way to store armour. Update 1.8 had a lot of different new features that really helped map creators, such as the invisible barrier blocks, the new spectator mode, and the 2 new world types. The customised world type allowed players to have the world generation create more unique and specific world types, while the debug mode world type was brilliant for resource map makers. During the Bountiful Update's development, Mojang as a company was bought by Microsoft for $2.5 billion. Following this, Notch and 2 other leading team members left Mojang and development of the game continued under new leadership. Notch is an incredibly interesting individual who easily deserves his own videos dedicated to him, but the story of Minecraft is something that is far larger than just Notch. Development of 1.8 would continue, but eventually it became time for Mojang to release its first full update under Microsoft, 1.9. While Update 1.8 sought to update one long ignored part of Minecraft, 1.9, the combat update, sought to update another. Ever since its introduction, the end had pretty much been ignored, with it meaning to serve as a final goal for the game, but apart from the Ender Dragon in the end blocks, there was not really much to encourage exploring it. The combat update not only made it possible to respawn the Ender Dragon and fight it again, but also made the end an actually expansive dimension. The ability to respawn the Ender Dragon was something that was sorely needed, especially on servers where many players might not have had the chance to fight the dragon the first time around. The Ender Dragon itself got a fair few changes, primarily to its attacks and AI, but the important change was what happened after it died. Now once the dragon was defeated, an End Gateway would spawn on the edge of the End Island. When an Eye of Ender is thrown through the bedrock surrounded portal block, the player is teleported to a group of Ender Islands. These islands have 2 types of new structures that can spawn on them. The first being sprawling end cities, and the second being floating end ships with Ender Dragon heads on the bow of the ship. On the islands themselves, large chorus fruit formations grow, while Endermen teleport everywhere. Endermen are not the only threat, however. In both the end cities and end ships, there are new shulker mobs that shoot projectiles, causing players to float when hit by them for a few seconds, posing a threat to even expert Minecraft players. The ultimate prize for exploring the End Islands is the Elytra, that can be found on the end ships and item frames. Taking up the chest slot, the Elytra gives the ability to glide through the sky. In Update 1.9, Elytras, while being incredibly useful to travel across the End Islands, were held back by the simple fact they required to be activated from a high height to travel the optimal distance. This is something that would later be changed when in Update 1.11, fireworks were made to be able to boost the Elytra, allowing for much further travel. End crystals could also now be crafted and used to deadly effect in PvP, and could also be used to respawn the Ender Dragon. Not being satisfied with just updating the end, Mojang reworked the combat system as well. At the core of these changes was the complete reworking of weapons damage and attack speed, as well as the removal of sword blocking. As I briefly touched on earlier, sword blocking was removed so that it could be replaced with the new shields, which worked in a similar way, while also being pretty effective at blocking arrows. The biggest weakness for shields are axes, which have a chance to disable the shield for a substantial enough period of time that it could make the difference between life or death in a PvP situation. A welcome piece of customization for shields is that banner designs can be merged onto the shield. The final big change to the combat system was dual wielding, which also had benefits for building. Now players could wield blocks in one hand and a weapon in another, or even 2 blocks at the same time. There are limits to this system however. For example, dual wielding weapons is not really doable since only the main hand is used for attacking. The combat system changes would come in especially handy against the new skeleton traps. What may seem like a completely innocent skeleton horse will be hit by lightning when a player comes close to it, spawning several skeleton horsemen. This may not sound too bad, but these skeleton horsemen can quickly overwhelm a player who was just going about their business and was not equipped to deal with several skeletons on horses. The only new non-end related structure was the igloo, which comes with its own secret basement. There was also the additions of the chain and repeating command blocks, which come in handy for creating giant command contraptions, and the structure block, that can save and load created structures. There was also changes to boats to make them more practical and prevent them from breaking as easily. The igloos in 1.9 were a prelude to two of the new mobs added in the following update, 1.10, the Frostburn update. If one mob was the main poster child of this update, it would definitely be the polar bear. This cute but equally deadly mob usually is neutral, but instantly becomes aggressive when a player gets close to its cubs. Swimming away from an angry polar bear isn't much of an option, since they can swim very fast. The other new snow-based mob, the Stray, is one of those mobs that personally I think is often forgotten about. These guys are essentially snow skeletons that have an 80% chance to spawn in snow biomes instead of normal skeletons. The final mob from the Frostburn update were the Husks, that were a similar concept to Strays, with them having an 80% chance of replacing zombies in desert biomes, and they don't burn in the sun. 5 new blocks were added as part of Frostburn, 3 of which were Nether themed. These were the Magma, Nether Wart and Red Nether Brick blocks. There isn't really much to talk about with these blocks, since with the exception of the Magma blocks that hurt players, these were purely decorational. Unlike the Nether Wart block, the Bone block could be turned back into its base materials, making it a storage block as well as a decorational one. There was also a block that could only be spawned through commands, the Structure Void, which was used for saving and loading structures. Speaking of structures, 4 new ones would come with the update. 3 of these would just be reworks of already existing structures, with them being the Mesa Mineshafts, Tiger Villages and Zombie Villages. The final new structure though were fossils, which were made from the new Bone block that could spawn deep underground. At the core of update 1.11, the exploration update, were the woodland mansions and the new deadly mobs residing within them. Even when they were added, woodland mansions are extremely rare to find, but are filled with valuable loot. Once a mansion is found, getting to said loot is not the easiest of tasks, since standing in the way are hordes of the new Vindicators and Evokers. The Vindicators aren't too hard to fight, despite being able to do a large amount of damage to unarmoured enemies, although in some of the bigger rooms of the mansion they do spawn in groups. The real threat within woodland mansions are the Evoker, with their summoning abilities. The first type of Evoker attack has its summoning fangs out of the ground that deal a fair amount of damage. The second summoning for the Evokers can be even more difficult to deal with, since it summons 3 of the new flying Vex mobs. Perhaps the thing that makes Vexes so difficult is that they can pass through any block, meaning that getting away from them can be extremely difficult, especially when dealing with several enemies at once. Evokers do also have another spell that they only do when out of combat. This spell has the Evoker turning blue sheep into red sheep. The main prize for killing an Evoker is the Totem of Undying they always drop upon death. Having a Totem of Undying in either hand essentially gives the player another chance when losing all health, by preventing death and giving them absorption and regeneration, at the cost of the totem being destroyed. The llama was the final mob added, and the only one to be completely unrelated to the woodland mansion. Llamas are a curious mob since they cannot be controlled while riding them, but when a lead is used on them, they can form a caravan of several other llamas. Carpets or chests can be strapped onto llamas, with the amount that can be carried vary from llama to llama. Llama's only form of self-defense is spitting at enemies. There were only 2 new blocks of update 1.11. One of these blocks, the shulker box, added so many new possibilities to Minecraft storage. On the surface, they may seem just like a chest with different colour variations that can be placed facing any direction, even on walls or roofs. But what makes the shulker box special is that it holds its inventory even when broken, which opens up a bunch of possibilities for compact storage, especially with redstone since shulker boxes can be placed by dispensers. Speaking of redstone, the other new block was the Observer, which lets off a redstone signal when it detects a change in the block state it's facing. Obtainable from village cartographers, the Explorer map would show players towards ocean monuments and woodland mansions, while iron gear could now be melted down into iron nuggets that could then be used to craft iron ingots. Compared to the last few updates that came before it, 1.12 was actually relatively small in new content. Out of the 2 new mobs added, one of them was never fully implemented into the game, and is only spawnable in the world through commands. This mob is the Illusioner, which, like several other mobs in Minecraft, is one which was made, but for whatever reason was never fully added as part of the game. Much like the Evoker, the Illusioner can cast 2 spells, but instead of summoning mobs, the Illusioner spells are meant to confuse and disorientate attackers. The first spell makes the player blind for 20 seconds, while the second spell makes it invisible and summons 4 duplicates. The second new mob in this update was the Parrot, which as well as being tameable can ride on a player's shoulder and dance to music. Except for the Parrot spawn egg, the only other new item added was the Knowledge Book, which like the Illusioner could only be spawned in through the use of commands. These knowledge books worked alongside the new recipe book to reveal all possible recipes. The only new blocks added were concrete powder, which when mixed with water becomes concrete, glazed terracotta, and different colour variations of beds. It was around this time that Minecraft Bedrock Edition was released. You see, under Microsoft, Mojang wanted to create a single, unified version of Minecraft that could be played on all devices. This on paper was a really good idea, since there were so many different versions of the game out there, and it was impossible for console users to play with people on PC. In application, however, I personally think that Bedrock Edition is slightly underwhelming. Now, don't get me wrong, it definitely has its advantages, and I can fully understand why some people may prefer it, especially with its multi-platform compatibility. For me though, there are just a few problems with it that I simply cannot overlook. First off, the game is heavily monetized with paid mods and even paid emotes and maps. I'm not going to comment on my actual opinion regarding paid mods or similar fan-made content because I feel it is irrelevant. What I am going to mention, however, is that Minecraft is a game with a massive child audience, and a lot of the paid content is questionable in quality. I also believe that the gameplay, especially where redstone is involved, is subpar to its Java Edition counterpart. This may be due to the fact that the engine used for Bedrock was the one used for Pocket Edition, though once again, in all fairness, Bedrock does have its advantages. As I said in Update 1.8, the ocean had been something which was largely overlooked in Minecraft, and sure, the content in 1.8 gave a further reason to explore the ocean, through ocean monuments. But still, those were relatively rare. 1.13, also known as Update Aquatic, sought to completely overhaul the ocean and bring it to life. A total of 8 new biomes came to the game, with 7 of them all being ocean-based, and the other being small end islands. The difference between before Update Aquatic and after is like night and day. The underwater world had never looked so good. What was once a barren wasteland was now filled with coral reefs, abandoned shipwrecks containing maps to buried treasure, and large strands of kelp. Being more visually appealing were not the only changes Mojang sought to add to the ocean, since for years the only underwater mob was the squid. Update Aquatic added cod, salmon, pufferfish and tropical fish, all of which could actually swim around like the squid, but could also be caught in a bucket to be easily moved around. A bigger water mob added were the dolphins, which had several uses. Feeding a dolphin raw cod would make them guide you to the closest shipwreck or ocean ruin, which is incredibly useful for finding loot quickly, especially since dolphins gave a movement boost in water when near them. Rarer than the other new mobs, turtles spawn in small groups on beaches. They have a bit of a unique breeding system since they lay eggs at the home beach they spawned on. When a baby turtle grows into an adult, it drops an item called Scoot, which can then be crafted into the turtle shell helmet, which gives water breathing for 10 seconds when entering water. While all of the mobs I have mentioned in Update Aquatic are not aggressive, there would be 2 mobs that were. First of these are the Drowned, which for all purposes is essentially an underwater variant of the zombie. More Drowned do spawn naturally underwater, they can also be created when a zombie drowns. Some Drowned will carry the new Trident weapon, which they may drop when killed. When a player uses a trident, they can either attack normally with it, or throw it a long distance, doing damage to any enemy it hits. If a trident has the Riptide enchantment, when it is thrown the player spins forward a great distance when they are in water or rain. This combined with an elytra effectively allows for an incredible amount of distance to be covered quickly in the rain. Phantoms were the other aggressive mob added, and was one that was voted for by the Minecraft community. It is also seen by many as one of the most annoying mobs in the game. Phantoms spawn in the sky above a player when they haven't slept for a certain period of time. They tend to fly around before diving at a player, attacking them then immediately retreating out of reach. Phantom Membrane drops when a phantom is killed. This is an item that replaced a lever in repairing the elytra. Gameplay wise, probably the biggest change in this update was the rework to the water mechanics and swimming system. How the game engine handled water was completely changed, and now water blocks could have bubbles that drag players down or push them upward. The new conduits act in a similar fashion to beacons, with them giving water breathing, night vision, and haste when powered. Update Aquatic also added the debug stick, which could only be obtained with commands, and allowed the changing of block states. Several of the updates for the last few years had been based around updating sections of the game that had gone for a long time without being updated and sorely needed, a trend that still is continuing to this day. 1.14, the Village and Pillage update, would be no exception to this, aiming to rework the village system by adding a greater variety to villages and villagers, while also adding deadly new threats. From now on, villagers would have different looks depending on both what biome they were from and what professions they had, which could be changed if they haven't leveled up depending on what blocks are nearby. The AI for villagers was reworked to give them schedules that include things such as talking to each other, working and sleeping, making villagers feel far more alive than before. The trading system was also reworked with new balance measures in place, such as villagers being able to change the price of their trades, and not restocking trades instantly. While these changes did fix many of the ways players had exploited the trading system, it didn't get rid of the problem entirely, since players will always find new and imaginative ways to exploit game mechanics. A new village-like mob, the Wandering Trader, would now spawn within a 48 block radius of players randomly. As well as the new Snowy Village, several of the other villages got appropriately updated locks. From now on, villagers would face new enemies in the Pillagers. These aggressive villager-looking mobs have their own outpost where they live and hold Iron Golems prisoner. There are also small groups of pillagers patrolling around the world that will attack on sight. Defeating one of these patrols gives the player the Bad Omen effect. To get rid of this, players can enter a village which will cause a pillager raid to begin. Waves of pillagers along with evokers, vindicators and the new ravagers descend upon the village, attempting to kill all the villagers they can. If a bell is rung during a raid, all villagers will run and hide in their houses from the attackers. Defeating all of the raiding force will cause the villagers to celebrate and offer discounts on their trades. Sometimes pillagers will also drop a crossbow. Compared to bows, crossbows take longer to load arrows, but do more damage and can hold loaded arrows when the crossbow is not being held. Fireworks can also be used instead of arrows, which while doing more damage are far more expensive to make. Many blocks such as mossy stone, sandstone and polished andesite can now be crafted into slabs and stairs, with some even being able to be turned into walls. A bunch of new crafting and utility blocks were added, which could also be used to assign villagers different professions. Most of these blocks have a purpose beyond just changing profession, such as the smoker that can quickly cook food. A very useful new lighting block was the lantern, which not only is pretty cheap to craft, but can also be placed on roofs and walls. The scaffolding blocks could be climbed through even when stacked on top of each other, making them perfect for temporary support for building larger, more complicated constructions. As with several previous updates, there was also a block that was helpful for map creation that could only be obtained with commands. This time it being the jigsaw block that allows the construction of structures using smaller templates. Some noteworthy items that I have not mentioned yet are the banner that are used to apply patterns to banners, craftable leather horse armour, and suspicious stew that hides its effects. While all of the new mobs and additions in 1.14 got players excited, one of the things many people were eagerly anticipating were the new pandas that could spawn in the 2 new bamboo biomes. These cute new mobs could spawn with one of several personalities which determine how the panda acts and whether they are aggressive or not. Cats could now spawn naturally inside of villages, and could be tamed in the same way as before. The The two other new mobs added in 1.14 were the cute foxes that sleep during the day, and the brown mushrooms. Update 1.15 was one of those updates based around mainly updating textures and basic balance changes. All of the actually new content was based around the new system for bees. Bees can be kept in beehives or nests, and will spend the day flying around pollinating plants to make them go to the next stage of growth. Using a glass bottle on a beehive will create a honey bottle that can then be used to create sugar or honey blocks that act the same as their slime counterparts but don't stick to them. It is possible that update 1.16 might just be the biggest update in Minecraft's history. It completely rejuvenated the outdated Nether by giving it new biomes, new mobs, and even a new tier of armour and weapons. Before the Nether update, the main mob encountered in the Nether were the zombie pigmen. Now though, they were renamed to the zombified piglins, and became far more rare to find, with them only spawning in certain parts of the Nether. Now the normal piglins became the standard mob within the Nether. Piglins have a taste for gold, and will be neutral towards players wearing gold, and if given a gold ingot will throw an item back in return. Stronger piglins, called piglin brutes, can spawn in the new loot-filled bastion remnants. Along with the piglins, there were hoglins and the zombified version of the zoglin, big boar-like monsters that charge players, knocking them away. Thanks to the new Strider mob, traversing through the lava lakes of the Nether has never been easier, with them being controlled using warped fungi in a similar way to pigs with a carrot on a stick. The Nether was redesigned with several new beautiful biomes, making the Nether look more diverse than ever. There was also a series of new structures, such as the Bastion remnants and ruined portals that could spawn in both the Nether and the overworld, making for easily repairable passages to and from the dimension. Of course, there would be many new blocks and even new types of wood, but there were also some blocks that made life in the Nether easier and less tedious. Being chargeable with glowstone, respawn anchors work essentially the same as beds, but just for in the Nether, with them having limited respawns before needing to be charged again. Another extremely useful new block was the lodestone, which allows linked compasses to aim towards them. The only new redstone block was the target, which gave out a redstone signal when hit. Arguably, one of the most important new features was the netherite armour and equipment. Netherite gear was the first gear in the game to be stronger than diamond, but to balance it out, netherite is far more expensive. To create a netherite ingot, you need 4 gold ingots and 4 netherite scrap that can only be obtained from smelting the rare ancient debris. Then this netherite ingot has to be combined with already existing normal diamond gear. At the time of making this video, update 1.17 Caves and Cliffs is not fully released yet, but several versions of it are playable. Out of all of the updates so far, this one looks like it will completely change the Minecraft world the most, with the world limit finally being drastically increased, allowing for taller mountains and far deeper caves. Everything that has been seen about the update so far, and what currently can be played, shows an update that will redesign the size of Minecraft worlds in a way unmatched by any previous update. With new exciting mobs in the goats, glow squids, axolotl and wardens, it's hard not to be excited for this update. I don't think there is any one thing that defines why Minecraft has been so successful, and I think that trying to put all of the credit on a certain aspect of the game is a gross misrepresentation of what has brought Minecraft so far. I believe that it is the culmination of so many different factors, both internal to the game and external, that have helped Minecraft become what it is today. But what I can say for sure is that the future for Minecraft has never looked so bright.